Sometimes it's hard to tell the players without a scorecard. That's especially true when it comes to Colorado's joint line between Denver and Pueblo. For one thing, the 119-mile route belongs to two rival railroads, Burlington Northern Santa Fe and Union Pacific. What's more, each railroad represents several mergers that happened in the 1990s. For example, Burlington Northern Santa Fe is the 1996 marriage of Santa Fe and Burlington Northern. Union Pacific, on the other hand, includes the former Chicago and Northwestern and Southern Pacific Railroads, folded into UP between 1996 and 1997. Let's face it, you can only paint so many locomotives so fast, which means that power consists on joint line trains tend to be colorful. But as we'll see, locomotives are only part of the reason why Colorado's joint line is one of the most exciting train watching spots in the West. Scratch the paint on those colorful joint line locomotive consists, and you'll find traces of the line's history. UP predecessor Denver and Rio Grande completed the first railroad between Denver and Pueblo in 1872. The line was part of General William Palmer's plan to connect Denver, El Paso, Texas, and Mexico City. BNSF predecessor Santa Fe arrived in Pueblo from Topeka, Kansas in 1876. Not content to hand over its Denver traffic to the DNRG, Santa Fe built its own route between Pueblo and Denver in 1887. As expected, the Denver and Rio Grande was not amused. To prove its point, it forced Santa Fe to build over the DNRG main line wherever the lines crossed. In 1885, BNSF predecessor Colorado and Southern acquired the bankrupt Denver and New Orleans, the third Denver-Pueblo line. Cursed with a poor route and a shabby physical plant, the CNS picked Santa Fe to handle its Denver traffic to Pueblo in 1899. In 1900, the Santa Fe and CNS decided to make their arrangement legal. Under a new joint line agreement, Santa Fe handled CNS through business between Pueblo and Denver. Switching at Denver fell to the CNS, while Santa Fe handled switching at Colorado Springs and Pueblo. In 1970, the CNS followed parent Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy into the Burlington Northern. William Palmer's Denver and Rio Grande became the Denver and Rio Grande Western. The Rio Grande later took Southern Pacific's name after it acquired SP in 1986. Despite the many changes, the DNRG and its successors were never party to the joint line agreement. In 1918, the United States Railway Administration took over America's railroads during World War I. To ease congestion on the Denver-Pueblo route, the USRA eliminated the flyovers and created a jointly owned and operated double-track railroad. Today, southbounds leave South Denver and use the former Rio Grande line through Big Lift to Sedalia, the site of the first flyover. Northbounds use the old Santa Fe in the other direction. From Sedalia, southbounds use the old Santa Fe through Castle Rock and Larkspur. They then switch back to the Rio Grande at Spruce for the next 2.2 miles into Palmer Lake. Single-track CTC starts at Palmer Lake and continues through Monument and Colorado Springs to the start of double-track at Cruz. At Cruz, southbounds use the Rio Grande to the old flyover at Fountain. Then they switch to the former Santa Fe for the next 21.6 miles to Bragdon, the end of the joint line. UP and BNSF trains then use their own tracks from Bragdon to Pueblo, the first crew change out of Denver. The locomotives used on the joint line are as interesting as the line's history and operations. SD-70 Max handle all BNSF coal trains on the joint line. Built by the Electromotive Division of General Motors, the 70 Max boasts a 4,000 horsepower 710 diesel engine. BNSF's newest units wear the railroad's Heritage 2 paint scheme, but all 70 Max share a critical feature, AC traction. Based on traction motors with fewer moving parts, AC traction offers superior performance and lower maintenance costs than comparable DC traction units. The newest DC traction diesels are BNSF's C44-9s. Built by General Electric in Erie, Pennsylvania, the Dash 9s turn out 4,400 horsepower. Older 6-motor road power includes EMD SD40-2s. The 3,000 horsepower unit may be the McDonald's hamburger of locomotives, with over 3,900 sold in North America between 1972 and 1986. SD40-2s also serve as helpers, along with their GE counterparts, the 3,000 horsepower C30-7. A shortage of power often requires BNSF to lease locomotives. This EMD SD45 belongs to Helm Leasing, a major railroad equipment leasing company. A southbound BNSF freight shows a mix of smaller 4-motor units of Santa Fe, Metro North, and BN Heritage. The Boeing airplane parts train that runs over BNSF frequently draws a single 4-motor unit, in this case a rebuilt Santa Fe GP30. Some of UP's oldest freight diesels happen to be GP30s as well. Rio Grande 3006 works a local between Denver and Sedalia. Built by EMD in 1962, it wears a design inspired by GM's automotive stylists. The key feature, a distinctive dynamic brake housing that seems to flow from the top of the cab to the front of the radiator section. The only thing keeping the Grand GP30s from the boneyard is UP's chronic motive power shortage. Eventually, they'll be replaced on this local, probably with 2,000 horsepower GP38-2s like this. The coal UP handles on the joint line originates on the old Rio Grande Craig branch in northwestern Colorado. Like BNSF, UP assigns only 6-motor AC diesels to coal trains. Instead of manned helpers, UP favors DPUs. These distributed power units are remote-controlled locomotives placed in the middle and often the rear of the train. The DPUs save money on crews and locomotive costs. Technically, the joint line begins at South Denver, 4 miles or so from downtown. An interlocking tower once protected the crossing of the Rio Grande and Santa Fe tracks at South Denver. Today, it's little more than a milepost location framed by Interstate 25 and the RTD light rail line. From here south to Littleton, the joint line is anything but scenic. But for residents of Littleton, that's a small price to pay.
In Littleton, we had several grade crossings right downtown, and the city didn't like it. Coming through there at a slow speed, restrict the speed about, I think we could do 25 in those days through town, and they didn't like it tying up the town. So they acquired some funds and sank the railroad into a ditch. And we go through Littleton. That was quite a project. Now there's a ongoing project now involving Denver's RTD, Rapid Transit, extending the southward line from South Denver all the way down to Mineral Avenue, just south of Littleton. And they're putting in rapid transit lines right beside our tracks, moving our tracks over a little bit here and there, new signal bridges, everything. Quite a development and changing the face. And the best part of it, now that I'm in grade crossing safety, is it eliminated a lot of very, very dangerous grade crossings. We're glad to see those gone.
750 million years before men spiked down the joint line, Colorado was largely flat and covered by a shallow sea. 500 million years later, the Rocky Mountains began to rise. The fuel burned by these locomotives was once plants and animals that lived and died during this time, known as the Paleozoic era. The slow transformation of those life forms into today's fossil fuels was still going on when the Gulf of Mexico crept north some 70 million years ago. Colorado was again submerged, and the mountains became underwater reefs. Eventually, the inland seas retreated to reveal the beginning of the landscape we see today. And after millions of years, the fossilized remains of the plants and animals that once populated Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana flow south on the joint line in the form of low-sulfur coal. If you think the word lift in Big Lift means lifting truck trailers onto railroad flat cars, you're right. But you won't find any evidence here of trailers on flat cars, commonly called TOFC. Although Santa Fe built Big Lift as a TOFC terminal, it lost that function when the railroad gave up on intermodal traffic between Denver and Texas in the late 1980s. Today, Big Lift survives as little more than a 6-track concrete apron public team track, a place to transfer bulk commodities from rail cars to trucks. It's also a convenient place to park BNSF helper engines like these SD40-2s between assignments. One of the quirks of the joint line is that a station can have 2 milepost markers. Sedalia, for example, is milepost 24.53 on the southbound track and 712.5 on the northbound track. The suburban sprawl that engulfed Littleton over time has yet to reach Sedalia. It still looks and feels like a small western town. Granted, the old Santa Fe depot is gone from the north track, but it only moved as far as someone's backyard off the highway that runs through town. Even if the new paint isn't authentic, you can't miss the Santa Fe signs on the old structure. Meanwhile, the heart of Sedalia stands along the two-lane highway off of Santa Fe Boulevard, sandwiched between the north and south tracks. Stroll by the town post office and you might even find a pair of local kids chucking rocks across the south track. The rolling, windswept prairie that surrounds Sedalia typifies the scenery along this chunk of the Joint Line. This is Douglas County, 5,400 feet above sea level and one of the fastest growing regions of the United States today. Mind you, growth was not the most important thing to Douglas County's first inhabitants. The area's Native Americans enjoyed shelter from winter storms of the mountains. In addition, they were just outside the reach of the extreme heat and scanty moisture of the plains. Douglas County was also one of the first stops along the route from the east to the western gold fields in the 1850s. Colorado's mining boom went bust in 1893, but more than 100 years later, the migration of people to the area continues. You can see as much when you're driving Santa Fe Boulevard between Sedalia and Castle Rock. The first suburbanites came here to escape the problems and congestion of Denver, but every new whitewashed suburban housing development brings more residents. And as the population grows, residents find themselves facing the same problems they thought they'd left behind. One of these problems is traffic. With only 2 lanes through Sedalia, Santa Fe Boulevard can be a frustrating commute to and from Denver. Fortunately, the Joint Line to the west of the highway offers relief for anyone who loves railroads. Northbounds usually roll downgrade at the maximum speed of 45 miles per hour. It's a different story for southbounds as they claw their way up the 1.4% grade that ends 35 miles to the south at Palmer Lake. With county offices, the county fairgrounds, and Interstate 25 running through the middle, Castle Rock is the center of business and government in Douglas County. Like Littleton, agriculture played a role in Castle Rock's development. A glimmer of that past lingers along the north track, a stone's throw away from the town's main street. Castle Rock got its start in 1874 when the scattered settlers in the area banded together and successfully mounted an effort to have the town declared the county seat of Douglas County. Today, 3,900 people call Castle Rock home. Like Littleton, urban development crowds the Joint Line tracks through Castle Rock like a concrete wave crashing against a breakwater. We're standing behind the town's McDonald's restaurant, located in a strip mall near the south track. Of course, if you have to wait in line for fast food, you might as well enjoy this view. Fortunately, Castle Rock has more to offer than strip malls and fast food. The town owes its name to a stone outcropping shaped very much like a medieval European castle. No matter which side of town you're on, regardless of the direction a train is moving, the distinctive landmark always identifies where you are. South of Castle Rock, you can drive the old highway and keep an eye on the south track at least as far as Palmer Lake. The scenery here is pastoral, almost rustic. This is ranch country with a view of the Rockies. As for train watching, nothing beats going trackside at any of the grade crossings between Larkspur and Tomah. A massive bridge leaded for the Santa Fe dispels any doubt about whose track this was before the 1918 realignment. Southbound UP coal trains take different routes after they leave the joint line. Some use the old Colorado and Southern route to Texas with BNSF crews. Others head east with UP crews toward La Junta, Colorado on the old Santa Fe. Most BNSF coal trains use the joint line to reach power plant customers in Texas. Generally, rail fans consider Larkspur the north end of the most scenic section of the joint line. In our opinion, the railroad between Greenland and Spruce feels like the most remote part of the joint line. It seems wild and untamed, in part because there's little sign of development. Even Interstate 25, the busy thoroughfare between Denver and Pueblo, seems a million miles away. You half expect to hear the labored breath of a Santa Fe 484 steam locomotive. Not that the trains BNSF and UP operate today are anything to complain about. Northbound trains rumble through the rolling prairies at Greenland like ocean freighters slicing through a golden sea. In that regard, the Greenland Ranch's well-maintained barn is a bright red lighthouse. Farm dogs trot out to meet visitors at trackside. We can only guess they're used to the sound of passing trains, given the amount of traffic that the joint line stuffs through Greenland. Spruce offers a glimpse at one of the flyovers where the Santa Fe once crossed over the Rio Grande. We're looking north at the spot where the abandoned Santa Fe track connected with the current southbound main. A concrete abutment shows where the Santa Fe flew over the Rio Grande below. That same track continued north to join the present northbound main, which sits east of the flyover. In case there's any doubt about who owns what, a sign next to the reconfigured south track spells it out clearly. Here we see a southbound BNSF coal train veering to the right as it leaves the old Santa Fe line for the Rio Grande. Even after the 1918 realignment, the hump that carried the Santa Fe track over the Rio Grande remains in place. The height of the old flyover is clear from the abandoned Rio Grande right-of-way. This southbound UP merchandise train is on the rails of the 1918 connection that bridged the original Santa Fe and Rio Grande tracks. A southbound UP coal train rolls off the USRA connecting track to the old Rio Grande line. When the USRA reconfigured the south track at Spruce, it created a sag. Southbound trains enter the sag and level off for a bit, long enough to catch their breath on the climb to the summit. Not every train sails over the realigned south track. Sometimes southbound trains will elect to stop at Spruce while northbounds clear the end of single-track CTC at Palmer Lake. Case in point, this southbound UP unit coal train crawling up to the signal at Spruce for a meet with the northbound. In accordance with the rules, the southbound can proceed to the next signal at reduced speed. Instead, the southbound stops in the sag and waits. The engineer knows the next signal is red. What's more, the climb from here to the crest of Palmer Lake is the steepest on the district. If the engineer takes his train to the summit and has to stop for any reason, he risks busting a drawbar or a coupler knuckle. So he holds at the yellow board at Spruce, knowing he can restart the train from here much easier. The northbound turns out to be another UP freight, a merchandise freight chasing the last light from the overcast sky. By the time the northbound train blows for the Greenland Ranch crossing, the signal for our southbound coal train turns green. The big AC diesels knuckle down and ease the loads out of the sag. As the lead unit passes the signal, it flicks to red. But the signal isn't the only bright color in sight. As the middle of the train clomps past, we're amazed to see flames erupting from the stack of one of the DPUs, an SP-AC 4400. Like an angry finger jabbing at the sky, the flames mark the progress of the coal train on the downhill side of the flyover hump. Even without flaming locomotives to contend with, the humps at the three old flyover locations present an operating problem for heavy trains.
Well, running is all very, very slow uphill and sometimes pretty fast downhill. And if we're not going up, we're going down. It's one or the other. We have some, our fastest track is between Cruz and Pueblo, or some of the freight trains that qualify for 55 miles an hour, and that's our fastest speed. And northbound, if we have two locomotives on line, it's just whatever you can do with two locomotives with an empty coal train. You could probably kick up 30, 35, maybe 40. Yeah, the flyovers you'll notice was at Sedalia and Spruce and Fountain. And the government came in 1918, straightened those out where we have one railroad track this way and one that way. And for directional running, well, they're quite a hogback, a little hump. And so they were not designed for these 115, 116 car coal trains, 16,000 tons, which we operate today. They're really put the knuckles in a stress. Well, you can have too much power, and if you have a weak link in the chain, and as that chain is humping over that little hogback, if it's a weak knuckle or a weak coupler, you're going to find it. So sometimes we relax the power on the head end, going over those humps. And it seems to prevent having a pull apart. So you just, after so many years, you just learn where it is, and it just automatically, it just kind of happens. And I like to show the new trainees is the same thing. It keeps them having to, pull apart, and the train comes to a stop, and now a lot of delay it, and the whole pipeline comes to a standstill while you're out there in the middle of the winter trying to change a knuckle. And it may be 20 below zero.
Palmer Lake is noteworthy for a number of reasons. For one thing, this is the end of double-track operations. For the next 32 miles, the joint line is a single-track CTC railroad. Double-track ABS resumes at Cruz and continues to the end of the joint line at Bragdon. Palmer Lake itself is an artificial lake created by the Denver and Rio Grande to collect water for steam locomotives arriving at Palmer Lake from both directions. When a steam engine crested the summit and started downhill, the crown sheet above the firebox at the back of the boiler had to remain covered with water. Therefore, it was imperative for all trains to take on water at Palmer Lake if the tender was running a little low. A channel built into the hills to the southwest funneled water to the lake. Diesel-electric locomotives obviated the need for locomotives taking water at Palmer Lake, but to the best of our knowledge, the collection system remains active, a tribute to the DNRG's ingenuity.
At Palmer Lake on the joint line is, of course, our highest elevation. That's the summit of the joint line, and it's downhill both ways out of Palmer Lake. Palmer Lake, I think the elevation is about 72, 80 feet. It's about the fourth or fifth highest location on the old Santa Fe Railway. And Palmer Lake is where we push all heavy trains southbound from Denver up to Palmer Lake, 50 miles, 52 miles. Cut off the pushers there, and pushers return back to Denver light engine because that locomotive power is not needed south of Palmer Lake. It's all mostly downhill. So the pushers return north to get ready for another push on another train.
Every southbound BNSF coal train goes through the same ritual when it gets to Palmer Lake. Cars skitter across the lone grade crossing with the certainty of locals who know how long the railroad will tie up the town. From a different vantage point on the other side of the crossing, we see the head end of the coal train as it tops the grade. After the train stops, the helpers uncouple from the rear and move back a few feet to allow the conductor to reattach the coal train's telemetry device, known as a FRED. Moments later, the coal train heads south as the helpers follow gingerly at a short distance. Then the helpers continue south. Moments later, the helpers head back north to Big Lift. There, they'll await the call to assist the next southbound coal train. After the helpers clear, a UP coal train heads south. The DPU helpers will stay with the train to Pueblo, allowing it to roll through Palmer Lake without stopping. Anyone driving through Palmer Lake would likely agree this sign for an old Kaiser Frazer garage is worth checking out, a totem from pre-war America. As for us, we'd vote for a stop along the joint line, where the single-track main offers a parade of trains. Another relic at Palmer Lake is this bridge, still lettered for original owner Rio Grande. Monument sits at milepost 57.2, the location of a 6,900-foot-long passing siding, the shortest CTC siding on the joint line. The double tracking of the joint line in 1918 eliminated the need for passing sidings. The railroad essentially became a two-lane highway. Trains moved one way on the north and south track without meeting. Unfortunately, what the plan didn't eliminate were grade crossings and noise problems in the city of Colorado Springs.
The reason it's single track between Palmer Lake and Colorado Springs and Cruz is because about the late 1960s, the city of Colorado Springs wanted the northbound or the Santa Fe track out of there. It wound around through a very residential area, right in alleys and streets and right beside people's houses and garages, and they didn't like all the noise at night, blowing for the grade crossings. So the railroads involved, the Rio Grande and the Santa Fe, thought, well, everything's okay with us. I mean, we don't find anything wrong with the tracks. But the city finally put up $1 million and said, look, now we're pretty serious about this. We want that track out of here. So that made the railroads kind of take notice, and so they worked out an agreement where they would take out the Santa Fe track from Cruz to Palmer Lake, and then use the Rio Grande track for all trains both directions, and put in some sidings at the Monument and Academy, and of course Colorado Springs, CTC sidings, and Kelker. And so that was done about 1973, 74, and about coincidentally at the same time all this happened was started mining and shipping coal out of Powder River, Wyoming, going to several utilities in Texas and Kansas, and that created quite a bottleneck, which we still have today, trying to get all the heavy tonnage trains through that bottleneck of single track.
The abandoned Santa Fe Main is now the site of the Santa Fe Regional Trail. The right-of-way that once carried the weight of Santa Fe freight and passenger trains belongs to bicycles and hikers. Although the Santa Fe track through Monument is gone, the railroad won the right to dispatch the CTC section that still belongs to Rio Grande's successor, Union Pacific. BNSF may dispatch the line, but it hasn't squashed the spirit of the old Rio Grande. At least not as long as BNSF trains continue to roll past this 50-foot boxcar, stored here for at least 20 years. From what we can tell, the two rivals coexist peacefully on the single-track section. And regardless of who's calling the shots, you won't hear us complaining about the train watching south of Monument. Our Colorado guidebook claims the U.S. Air Force Academy is something of a tourist attraction. It notes the 18,000-acre officer training campus is impressive for its beautiful grounds, rife with wild game in the forests at the foot of the Rocky Mountains. We couldn't agree more, especially once we got permission to go trackside at what railroaders call Academy. Deep inside the Academy grounds, 3 tracks reflect some of the joint line's pre-Amtrak glory. The tracks at Stadium once held special trains that carried cadets to Academy football games and other special events. Today, the tracks are empty, except for an occasional car that's been set out or stored for some unknown reason. In 1871, the Denver and Rio Grande's William Palmer bought 10,000 acres of land near Pikes Peak and launched a city that would become known as Colorado Springs. Originally called Fountain Colony, Palmer envisioned the Springs as a thoroughly modern and upright community. Conceived from the start to draw tourists to nearby Pikes Peak and other scenic attractions, Palmer's planned community grew to a thriving city of some 291,000 people. Like California's Silicon Valley, high-tech industries fuel Colorado Springs' economy. With the growth, the Springs have taken on the feel of Denver and other large urban areas. Only the mountains keep the urban developments that engulf the Joint Line from sprawling much to the west. Downtown Colorado Springs offers a glimpse of the city's earlier charm. The old Rio Grande station survives, a reminder of the days when the Royal Gorge and other passenger trains called here. Today, the structure hosts an Italian restaurant that offers an even better view of the tracks than the McDonald's parking lot back in Castle Rock. Parking near the old station isn't limited to the restaurant's patrons. This week's UP Local rates SP 7131 and EMD GP40 upgraded by MK Rail with new components. The result is a GP40M rated at 3,000 horsepower, more than enough power for local switching chores. The unit wears Southern Pacific's Shonen speed letters, similar to owner Rio Grande's own logo. Unlike 7131's paint scheme, the inspiration for Santa Fe's Superfleet colors came from the past. The red and silver war bonnet scheme harkens back to 1937 when EMD predecessor Electromotive Corporation applied the colors to Santa Fe's first streamlined passenger diesel. Another paint scheme with historic roots is BNSF's Heritage colors. Although the railroad claims the colors represent several components of the 1970 BN merger, the colors really harken back to predecessor Great Northern's post-war paint scheme. Predecessor BN painted its coal service SD70 Max in this paint scheme. They're called Grinsteins, after then-President Gerald Grinstein, who chose the colors. This engine house is the only evidence of the Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific's decision to choose Colorado Springs as its western terminus in the 1880s. The Rock also operated to Pueblo on Rio Grande trackage rights. Today, the engine house and 500 feet of track belong to the Pikes Peak Historical Street Railway Foundation. The interpretive center features a number of trolleys, including PCC cars built in the 1940s. If the single-track CTC section is the Joint Line's waist, then cruise is the railroad's hips. That's because double-track operations return at cruise. Unlike the southbound track between Spruce and Palmer Lake, there are no sags to interfere with train handling. Northbound trains on the old Santa Fe simply ease to a stop at the signal that protects the end of double track. This is the first controlled CTC signal northbounds encounter since leaving Bragdon. Another sign explains who's responsible for what north of this point. Moments later, a UP SD90 Mac threads a southbound freight onto the old Rio Grande main, now the South Track. The abandoned Santa Fe abutment at the south end of the old Fountain flyover offers a fine view of a BNSF freight on the southbound main, the former Rio Grande route. Moments later, a general merchandise freight slams north. View from the abutment with a telephoto lens shows the way the Rio Grande line was realigned with the Santa Fe to form the northbound track. Near the site of the old flyover is the south end of the track the USRA built to connect the two routes. What's harder to see at first is the remnants of the north abutment, now little more than a nondescript mound to the northeast of the flyover. For all intents and purposes, the joint line ends at Bragdon, 11 miles north of Pueblo. A cluster of signals guards the interlocking at Bragdon. The track swinging off to the right in the distance connects BNSF's Pikes Peak sub with the joint line northbound main. This track peeling off to the right takes UP southbounds down the former Rio Grande main to Pueblo Junction. Once UP southbounds leave the joint line, they go one of three directions: west to the Pueblo Yard, south toward Trinidad with BNSF crews, or east towards La Junta, Colorado. Southbound BNSF trains follow the old Santa Fe main through Bragdon. From here, they continue into Pueblo Yards and Pueblo Junction. Many BNSF northbounds swap crews at Pueblo Junction and use the former Rio Grande main to Bragdon. The city of Pueblo has a blue-collar pedigree, hardly surprising given its claim to the first fully integrated steel mill in the West. Pueblo has something more elegant to its credit: the Union Avenue Historic District. Renovation of old downtown means many of the old buildings have been converted to gift shops and cafes. Anchoring the district is the 1870 vintage Pueblo Union Depot. The four-story Romanesque Revival building once served the passenger trains of Santa Fe, Rock Island, Rio Grande, Missouri Pacific, and Colorado and Southern. Pueblo's population is about 102,000 people and one steam engine, Santa Fe Northern number 2912. The Big 484 is the centerpiece of the Pueblo Locomotive and Rail Historical Museum, located near the depot. Delivered to the Santa Fe between 1943 and 1944 by Baldwin, the 2900s were the biggest and heaviest Northerns ever built. Standing on 80-inch drivers, the 2912 delivered more than 79,960 pounds of tractive effort to the rail. A plan to restore the 2912 to full operational condition is the cornerstone of the Society's living history approach to preservation. A railroad museum planned for the old Rio Grande Freight Depot will eventually house the rest of the group's collection of Colorado theme equipment. As for contemporary railroading, we recommend the street bridge near the Pueblo Union Depot. From here, you can see the south end of UP's Pueblo Yard. Before UP closed Tennessee Pass, the yard inspected and serviced all east, west, and southbound trains. Today, it sees little more than a twice-weekly UP local west of Pueblo and trains to and from Alamosa. The bridge is a good place to think about Pueblo's past, the days when passengers strolled out of the Union Depot to board Missouri Pacific's Colorado Eagle for St. Louis, or Rio Grande's Scenic Limited for Salt Lake City. 40 years ago, who would have guessed that both railroads would end up in Union Pacific's camp? Time doesn't just pass us by, it catches us by surprise. All we can really do is live fully in the moment. For us, that means turning our attention to the next train. As a spiritual path, looking into the future seems as pointless as dwelling in the past. On the other hand, there's a lot to be said for planning ahead, especially when you're in the railroad business. For the joint line, planning means eliminating the current single-track bottleneck by replacing the second main between Palmer Lake and Cruz. The plan is to simply absorb the present sidings and prudently locate CTC crossovers to improve operations. What does the future hold? Hey, don't ask us. We're too busy at trackside enjoying one of the best shows in all of Western railroading, Colorado's Joint Line.
Thank you for watching this Publisher's Choice edition of the Ultimate Railroading DVD series. We hope you look forward to future Publisher's Choice DVDs as together we rediscover the past, enjoy the present, and look to the future of the world of trains around us.